My name is Regina Barr, and I'm the founder of the Women at the Top Network. I'm going to be your host today. And joining me is Lisa Apolinski. Lisa is a content coach and a creator and the CEO of Three Dog Right. She teaches agency and business owners how to use their content to attract more right fit clients so that they experience a positive return on investment in marketing. She's written several books, Weathering the Digital Storm, Persuade with a Digital Content Story, and her newest book, The Greatest Personal Brand Ever Told. This book helps businesses create brand legacy. She's been featured in Forbes and the New York Times for her digital storytelling expertise and dubbed America's Digital Content Futurist. Welcome to our podcast today, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Regina. It's wonderful to be here.
We're delighted to have you. And I think this is always a timely topic because I think we're in a constant evolution when it comes to digital marketing and branding and all of those kinds of things. So I'm excited to talk about your most recent book, which I do have a copy here. Yes. So let's talk about the book. Your book focuses on your personal brand journey. And I always like to find out sort of what drove you to write this book, why now? So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, The Greatest Brand Story Ever Told.
So I was attending Mark Schaefer's Uprising Conference. If you're not familiar with it and you are in marketing, absolutely something to attend. I was asked at the end of the 3 days to summarize the conference. No pressure. And
no kidding, right? Yeah.
Right. With people who are just ridiculous experts in their field, and I'm feeling very intimidated. So I'm going through my notes, reading each point, and I was like, I feel like I've heard this before. And it just hit me. This is items that the personal brand of Jesus have already done. And at first I thought, oh no, that means we're not doing anything new. And then I reframed it that means we're on the right track, following a 2,000-year-old guide with a personal brand that really has stood the test of time and is the legacy that we're all looking for.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to have a 2,000 plus year legacy? Particularly when it comes to our brand. Most of us are struggling to get our brand out there just in the short term, let alone 2,000 years. So absolutely. Well, I love that. And I think, here at Women at the Top, we do focus on women, but we have men who also watch and listen to the podcast. So lots of the viewers and listeners are women. And I always like to ask, from your perspective, do you see any unique challenges that women face versus men when they're creating their personal brand?
Yes and no. So one of the things that I think women struggle with, that we as women struggle with, is to highlight and showcase our achievements and things that we've done. And I am absolutely guilty of this, where I have that imposter syndrome, and I don't think that my story is relevant or should be shared. All stories are relevant. Your story matters. Framing it so that you're focused on the audience or the prospect that you want to engage will help remove that imposter syndrome. And this is true for men too, so that you're able to focus on why the person should be looking at the problem at all, why now, and why you. So the 3 whys.
It's interesting that you say that, because I have done some work about doing some storytelling as it relates to some of my writing. And it would be interesting. I could write all the facts and stats, and then I would get stuck on the stories. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't think of anything. And then I'd have a conversation with someone and I would say, gosh, I can't. And they would ask me a question. And then immediately stories would come to mind. So we have to find a way to tap into those things, because I think being able to tell our own stories also makes our message authentic.
Yes. And it makes it a conversation, right? I mean, you and I were talking before we even started that This isn't me lecturing at you in the audience. This is me sharing my stories, which makes it a conversation for sure.
Absolutely. And hopefully things that people can relate to.
Yes.
Now, this October, we'll be focusing on National Women's Small Business Month. So we've been doing some work around that here at Women at the Top. And tell us a little bit, is personal branding different for a business owner versus a person on a career path? Why or why not, if it's not?
So, yeah. So I live in the world of multiple right answers. So,
I live in the world of gray areas, no black and white. So you and I are
exactly.
tracking.
Absolutely. So, I started my career in the corporate world. I worked for companies like Caremark CVS, American Express, RSM McGladrey, very large organizations. And in a way, personal branding has the same issue whether you're in corporate or you're an entrepreneur, small business owner. It's getting through the digital noise. You have lots of things that are competing, and being able to share your personal brand becomes very relevant for both individuals. The difference that I would say is in corporate, you have to think about what your audience is or who your audience is and what problem you're trying to solve. And thinking about it that way will shift your stories, but I think personal branding is still really critical either way because you're trying to highlight who you are, how you can help, and what you're able to give to your community, whether it's a corporate community or a community in your industry.
So when you talk about, know who your audience is and what problem you're solving, what would be an element of your personal brand that you would potentially bring to the table if you were in a corporate environment, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're thinking about a corporate environment and the problem that you're solving, you have to think about the layers of the hierarchy. You're not just serving your customers or the, the the customers that are purchasing from the organization. You also have to think up, right? You have to manage up. What problems can you solve for your boss? What problems can you solve for your boss's boss? Think 2 or 3 levels up the food chain of how you as an individual can actually impact those people as well as serving the customers. It's a little bit more intense, I think, when you're in a corporate environment, but when you start to think about what can you do to help your boss look good and win? What can you do to help your boss's boss look good and win? They will see that. They will recognize that, and that's how you start to get what we're looking for, which is authority, power,
Mhm.
thought leadership, and credibility.
Well, I love that because I think sometimes people make the mistake of they're focused down or just their immediate supervisor or boss. And sometimes they sell themselves short, especially women, in thinking
Yes.
that there isn't something that they could do to help their boss or their boss's boss. Um, and ironically, I always tell people it's lonely at the top. So those people need all the help that they can get, and they need people who are willing to share ideas and also, when appropriate, to challenge them. Otherwise,
Yes.
they live up there in that little bubble, and that's not good for anybody. So,
Right.
great advice. So, let's talk about storytelling. And most good storytelling involves certain elements to make a connection with the audience. So, talk a little bit about how can women become more effective storytellers?
Yes. Well, the first thing they can do is go out and purchase the Persuade with a Digital Content Storybook that I've written, which is a book award winner. It was named one of the top content marketing books in the world to read. That was in 2011. No, 2021. Sorry. I don't know what year it is. It's
It's
2024.
2024, but it's just
Ah!
2021. And I actually have it, but I don't have it handy. So, otherwise, I
Yeah.
would have flipped it up. So,
Yeah, absolutely. When we're talking about storytelling, and this also ties into personal branding. Storytelling isn't about making you the focus. Personal branding has really doesn't have a lot to do with you. It has to do with the value that you bring to the audience. And the same with storytelling. How can you help the audience visualize getting to a future success point with you as the guide? And when you flip where you're allowing your audience members to become the hero and achieve that success point, you're not only showing relatability, but you're tying into that emotional aspect of your audience, of your prospect, where they can see themselves working with you and getting to their future state of success. I think women do a couple of things, and actually, I would say men do this sometimes too, but women do this a lot. Like we said before, we sell ourselves short.
Mhm.
If you think about, as a result of working with me, you will be able to, it will help you get over that. I'm not good enough. All I do is this. It's not that big of a deal. Think about the results they get from working with you. And then, second, think about how your story and that detail can help them visualize a future state of success that maybe they haven't thought of before. And again, it goes back to that why and why now. So,
Mhm.
helping them with your stories, sharing that, not only are you helping them make a good decision, you're also empowering them to make that decision.
That's great. I know that when I have worked with women in a coaching situation, that very often they do find it hard to articulate, especially their success stories. And one of the things
Yes.
that I tell them is a little device to help them remember stories to kind of keep in their back pocket. So if it comes up, they're more in the habit of being able to relay a story that in a way that feels good to them, not always self-centered around themselves. Because we
Yes.
women love to share the kudos and we're more relational and all those other great things. And it's to have a car in their back pocket. And that simply stands for challenge, action, and result. So, what issue or
Exactly.
challenge did you face that you solved? What action did you take? And what was the outcome? And sometimes doing it that way just gives them a little device to be able to remember stories or examples or things that they can share when they come up, because I think a lot of times women do sell themselves short, and it's because maybe in the moment or on the spot because they've got 25 other things they're thinking about,
Right.
they can't come up with something. So
Right.
that's a little tip that people can use. So,
Absolutely. And if I could just add really, really quickly, the the other thing is, most of us have an area of genius. And there's a problem that we solve that if we got our hands on it, we could get it across the finish line. And that also relates to what is the problem that your audience or your prospects are struggling with. So helping to define that area of genius and going, if I got this one client and got this one thing, I could solve it for them. It's one less thing that keeps them up at night. That can help get you over that imposter syndrome and start to share your stories as well.
I love that. That's really good food for thought. And maybe women might need to take a little time out to think about that, maybe journal about it, whatever floats their boat in terms of coming up with that, because I think that would require a little bit of internal reflection and
Yeah.
thought time.
Yes.
So I think we can all agree it is important to have a personal brand. And we all have one, right? Whether we realize it or not. So what is one important step that our listeners or viewers could take today that would help to move their own personal marketing needle?
Well, I think there's a couple of things they can do. First is start to share your thought leadership. You don't have to have every single answer. You don't have to be completely right, but you have information that you can add to a conversation to get the conversation started. When we share our thought leadership in our areas of genius and we start having those conversations, naturally we start to develop community. And community allows that connection, and connection leads to trust. And people purchase from people they know, like, and trust.
Trust. Yes.
So they get to know you, they get to like you, they get to trust you. Start doing that today, even if it's just finding another influencer that you respect on LinkedIn or Facebook and commenting on their comments. Like you said, it's lonely at the top. A lot of these influencers are still like, oh my God, will someone actually like what I wrote? They have imposter syndrome too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being there for them and supporting your community. And
I love
that's
that.
something you can do. Take 2 minutes, 5 minutes out of your day to do that every single day. One a day, one a day, one a day, like taking a vitamin.
Yep. And I think I like that because it's simple and easy. Most people are going out to LinkedIn with some level of frequency, and you know, we can all find something that we want to comment on if you're doing just one. And sometimes then when you're there, maybe you get engaged and you find a couple of other things. So
Right.
it can be a win-win in a very simple professional environment. So I think for most of our viewers and listeners, LinkedIn is the appropriate place to be building some of those relationships and developing their brand.
Absolutely.
So I think with the work that you're doing out in the world in your area of expertise, it's probably not far off to say that sometimes creating a personal brand can have challenges. So, what was the biggest challenge or obstacle that you faced when you were developing your own personal brand?
That is an awesome question. Um, I fell into the trap that everyone falls into of trying to be everything for everyone. I started out in content. My company name is Three Dog Write, write like write with a pen, because I started out doing blogging back in 2012. If you recall, blogging was the bee's knees. And I started to move away from that a little bit, and I ended up becoming more of a full service agency. And I was under a lot of stress. Number one, I worked a ton of hours trying to manage everything. And I lost my spark of joy because I was doing all this other stuff. And last year, I actually did a call with Predictive ROI. I did one of their free seminars, and I realized I needed to get very niche. I needed to go back to my roots of why I started my company in the first place, and scared the crap out of me. But I basically blew up my business and put it back together with just content, and became a content coach and creator. And personal brand is a very natural progression of that because it's about communication. So it's okay to step off the path accidentally. You can get back on it. It's not like, we've been watching Disney and Agatha all along. And if you fall off the witch's path, you die. That's not true in the real world. You can get back on the path. It's okay. So wherever you are in your journey, if you feel like you've moved away from your core brand purpose, which all of us can and maybe will do, you can get back into it. You can simplify. And again, it's going back to that, like you said, reflecting, journaling, thinking about, what area, if I had to pick one, and it's not like you have to pick just one, but if you got really good in one area and that was what you were known for, what would it be?
I think that's great advice. When I think about the corporate world and some of the viewers and listeners that are with us today, I think about how women are very competent, right? And they get promoted, and very often they get new responsibilities, but they don't lose the old responsibilities.
Yeah.
And then because they're so competent, then they get asked to do another thing and another thing and another thing. And I think what was really resonating with me is then all of a sudden one day they wake up and they feel burned out. They feel no joy. And
Yeah.
it's because they have completely lost the sense of who they are and what they're really there to do. So I
Right.
like that kind of stepping off the path, figuring it back out, and then getting back on. So I think that's something, whether you're a small business or someone in corporate, man or woman, I think it's something we can all relate to. And it's something that we can all work on in much the way you just described. So that really resonated with me as well. And I've been in business and I was in corporate like yourself for a long time.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that we are focusing on National Women's Small Business Month, and you've been working with corporate clients and business owners for over 30 years. So when you think back along the course of your own career, what do you wish you had known sooner or earlier as a business owner or in corporate America or both? What do you wish you had known?
Um,
Looking back, that hindsight is always so
yeah.
great, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. You know, I so interestingly, my parents owned a small business. And when I first started my corporate career, and I don't know if this happened to you too, I just thought that was the path. I didn't realize there were other paths to choose. Um, and I would, in a way, I would say, oh, I wish I had known that instead of hitting my head on the glass ceiling, I could have just stepped outside of it and had all sorts of room. But at the same time, the journey that I took made me the business owner that I am today. And so starting my business happened at exactly the right time. Um, so I don't know if, I mean, I wouldn't go back and change anything. Just knowing that there are these different paths now has definitely allowed me to be the champion of that for my clients if they want to go back into corporate, if they are in corporate and need assistance, if they're starting a new company, and just helping them navigate that and know that, you can, it's, you're building your own adventure and that's okay.
Mhm. I like that, that you tried something other than just the small business path. I didn't have small business owners that were close to me or my family. Um, my mom didn't even have a high school diploma, so grew up in a different environment. But I worked in very large companies in startup divisions. So they were very entrepreneurial without all the risk that you take when you're
Right.
your own small business owner. So I had that as a blessing and learned a lot. And it actually, in some of the lessons and the challenges I faced are what led me to start podcasting. And one of the things that I noticed is that very rarely were women recognized or given the opportunity to be quoted or speak in the media. Back in those days, remember when we used to all read physical papers,
Yes.
dating myself. And I noticed that rarely were women quoted, or if they were talking to authors, 99.9% of the time it was a man. So when
Right.
I started this podcast, and my executive assistant, Chris, who you've talked with, she's been with me literally since day one of my podcast. I told her that I wanted to showcase women and specifically women authors. So, because of what I was seeing and experiencing as a corporate marketing executive, working with the media, trying to get placements and other things to go on. So, um, kind of a different way of getting at it. But like you said, found a way to really be authentic to myself but really valued the experiences that I had in the corporate world.
Yeah.
I feel like the corporate world really gave me a great foundation. Like I came out and I would do monthly expense report for my little small business, and I paid myself monthly. I didn't use my
Yeah.
checkbook as a checking account. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
a lot of that discipline came out of working in the corporate realm. So
Yeah.
um, it's great that you're able to kind of navigate both of those aisles. So I know you're going to find this hard to believe as a storyteller, but we are winding down on time. And I always like to end with giving some advice to our listeners or viewers. So, what last piece of advice would you give to our listeners or viewers when it comes to building a personal branding legacy?
This is something that I always say. It's one of my magic words and phrases. And I feel like this will always be true. Digital marketing, personal branding, because it's shifting so often, is like a climb with no summit. Wherever you are on your journey, you still have 100% to go. So just keep going.
I love that, especially as someone that does I hike, I don't mountain climb, but
Ah,
love that visual that you gave that we're always have work to do
yeah,
and it's okay because we as humans evolve and grow and want to continue to stay fresh. So
yes.
that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank you, Lisa, for being with us. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and a big thank you to our viewers and our listeners for joining us. See you next time.